There's a particular kind of unhappiness that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It lives inside relationships that make sense, that are stable, that were chosen carefully. Nothing is obviously wrong, and that's what makes it so confusing. Because on paper, this relationship should work. Your partner is kind, reliable, good on paper. The life you've built together is functional. You have responsibilities, routines, a shared future. And yet something inside you has gone quiet. Not explosive, just flat, disconnected, dim. Desire fades, curiosity fades, sensuality fades, and eventually you find yourself asking a question you're almost afraid to say out loud. Why do I feel so lonely inside something that's supposed to be love? If you're telling yourself you're just not grateful enough, that's not what this is. Because gratitude does not fix the emptiness that comes from choosing safety while slowly losing connection to yourself. Today I'm going to talk about why this happens, why people who genuinely care about each other sometimes stop feeling alive inside a relationship, how the self gets lost inside stability, and why the answer is not necessarily leaving, but learning how to feel alive inside the life you already have. Because from a tantric perspective, love was never meant to be a place where you slowly disappear. It was meant to make you more awake. I'm Sarrah Rose. I'm the founder of the Tantric Activation Method, and I've spent 2 decades at the intersection of Tantric philosophy, neuroscience, and modern coaching. After formally studying Tantra in the Himalayas and working privately with over 2,500 people, including executives and entrepreneurs, I've come to one conclusion that shapes everything I teach. The gap most people feel in their relationships isn't about who they're with. It's about what their body has never learned to hold. That's what Love Activated is about, and that's what we're exploring today. I want to start somewhere personal because this episode is one I understand from the inside. In high school, a very long time ago, I dated someone who was everything I was supposed to want. He was kind, a genuine gentleman, smart, responsible, mature, good grades, a good family, a good future. His mother was my grandmother's best friend. We went to the same church. My parents liked him. We were supposed to go to college together. We were supposed to get married after. I grew up in Arizona. My father was the pastor of our church, and this relationship wasn't just a relationship. It was the entire life I was expected to step into. It was already built. All I had to do was show up and become the person who fit inside it. I cared for him. I want to be clear about that. He was good to me in every way a person can be good. I wasn't in love with him. And if I'm honest, I was a little bored. Not because he was doing anything wrong, because the life we were building together, as right as it looked on paper, didn't have me fully in it. So I left. Not because of anything he did. I left for New York, and that decision cost me something real. My family didn't understand it. My community didn't understand it. I was walking away from everything that was supposed to make sense. The church, the plan, the certainty, the approval. But something in me knew that stepping into that picture, how safe, however much everyone around me wanted to, would have required me to leave myself behind in order to fit inside it. And I wasn't willing to call that love. That choice, choosing aliveness over safety, not because safety was bad, but because a life that looked right from the outside and felt dim on the inside wasn't enough, is what this episode is about. Before we go further, we need to separate 2 situations that often look identical from the outside but require completely different responses. Sometimes people choose a relationship where real chemistry was never present. They chose compatibility, stability, logic. They admired and respected the person, and they built something solid. But their body was never truly awake inside it. This matters because chemistry is biological. It's not a mindset. You cannot manufacture a deep erotic connection through gratitude, maturity, or reminding yourself of how good someone looks on paper. Your nervous system does not read resumes. If the spark was never there, The grief is about facing that truth honestly. Other times, chemistry absolutely existed. The body was awake, desire felt effortless, connection felt spontaneous, and over time, that aliveness faded. Those are not the same problem. Early chemistry is fueled by novelty, dopamine, and uncertainty. It is intense by design. As relationships stabilize, the nervous system settles. That intensity naturally shifts. If that shift isn't understood and consciously nurtured, people mistake evolution for loss. Chemistry cannot be faked, but it also cannot be neglected and last. So the real question is, are you grieving something that was never truly present or something that was never intentionally sustained? That distinction changes everything about what comes next. Most people don't build relationships without aliveness because they're afraid of love. They build stability without vitality because they were taught that wanting too much is dangerous, that passion is unreliable, that responsibility matters more than desire. So when it comes time to commit or to stay, many people override sensation with logic. This person is good for me. They're stable. This is the responsible choice. And those things matter. But when desire is excluded instead of integrated, it doesn't disappear. It goes underground. And when desire goes underground, it becomes resentment, numbness in the body, irritability over small things, fantasizing about a different life. And eventually the question people are afraid to say out loud is this all there is? The self that once felt alive doesn't vanish, it fragments. Parts of you become the responsible partner, the stable one, the functional adult who keeps everything running smoothly. And the other part goes silent, the sensual part, the curious part, the part that wanted, the part that felt deeply, the part that moved toward pleasure and truth instead of toward what was manageable. Most people don't notice this happening in a dramatic moment. It happens through 1,000 small decisions to be agreeable instead of honest, to stay contained instead of fully expressed, to preserve harmony instead of remaining alive. In tantric terms, it's this Shakti suppressed life force that has learned to contract around responsibility rather than flow through it. And when Shakti goes underground, it doesn't disappear. It waits and it finds other ways to make itself known in restlessness and the quiet grief of a life that functions but doesn't feel fully inhabited. I worked with a woman who had been married for over a decade. Her husband was genuinely kind, emotionally steady, a good father, and she kept telling herself that she should be grateful. Objectively, her life was good, but privately, she felt numb. Their relationship had become entirely functional: schedules, responsibilities, children, logics, very little sensuality, very little play, very little curiosity about each other. And one night she said something that stayed with me. I miss feeling awake inside my own life. And what became clear over time was that she didn't simply miss chemistry, she missed herself. She had spent years becoming responsible, contained, accommodating, predictable, and in the process, she has slowly abandoned the parts of herself that felt most alive: her desire, her sensuality, her spontaneity, her emotional depth, her vitality. The relationship itself was not the problem. The problem was that the alive self had slowly stopped being included inside it. Her lost self was asking for inclusion. This is where many people become confused. They assume the problem is commitment itself, that monogamy means the end of spontaneity, the end of curiosity, the end of desire. But the real issue is not commitment, it's suppression. Commitment does create constraint. Choosing one person means not choosing others. Every meaningful choice does this. Choosing a career closes other paths. Choosing where to live limits geography. Constraint is the nature of devotion. But constraint is not the same thing as self-erasure. Constraint becomes suffocating only when it requires you to amputate parts of yourself in order to belong. Monogamy is not inherently deadening, but unconscious monogamy is, because spontaneity is not about having endless options. And anyone who has spent significant time on dating apps can confirm that endless options are actually exhausting. Spontaneity is about being fully expressed within the relationship you chose. Tantra understands this deeply. Desire is not only spontaneous, it is also responsive. It responds to attention, curiosity, presence, vitality, play, truth. Desire grows where attention lives, which means desire is not just something that happens to us. It is something we participate in. When curiosity, play, sensuality, and emotional honesty remain alive inside a partnership, desire doesn't have to wander in order to stay awake. It can deepen toward the person you already chose. The question is not how to manage desire that wanders. The question is where you allow your desire to live. I worked with a man who deeply loved his partner, and they really had a beautiful life together, but internally he felt increasingly disconnected, not only from her, but from himself. And one of the things he told me was that he felt like he became the version of himself that kept the relationship functioning. He had stopped dancing, he had stopped making art, he stopped dressing expressively, stopped initiating sex, stopped traveling spontaneously, stopped sharing the thoughts that felt too intense or too vulnerable for the version of himself that he had agreed to be inside the relationship. Not because she demanded it, but because somewhere along the way, he started prioritizing emotional manageability over aliveness. He slowly stopped expressing the parts of himself that felt inconvenient to the stability he was trying to protect. And eventually, resentment replaced desire. Not resentment toward her, resentment toward the parts of himself he had abandoned in order to maintain the peace. Once he began reconnecting to those parts through movement, music, embodiment, creativity, honest self-expression, something shifted, not only in him, but in the relationship, because desire returned when life force returned. Many relationships don't lose desire because love disappeared. They lose desire because the alive self disappeared. When people say they want passion again, they're not usually looking for chaos. They're asking for something much simpler. Is it possible to feel alive and safe at the same time? Most people are never shown that it is, so they assume they must choose security or desire, stability or aliveness, commitment or freedom, devotion or vitality. That is a false choice. From a tantric perspective, devotion can intensify aliveness, but only when both people remain willing to grow, to stay curious, to keep discovering each other instead of assuming the relationship has already been fully defined. What unconsciously kills long-term desire is not commitment. It's the slow accumulation of small contractions, stopping saying what you actually want, stopping initiating, stopping risking honesty, stopping touching each other with curiosity, stopping bringing your living self into the relationship and replacing it with your functional self. Slowly, the relationship loses its pulse, not because long-term love is impossible, but because both people stop bringing living energy into it. This is why Tantra places such emphasis on presence, because aliveness lives in presence, not in autopilot, not in role performance, not in emotional management, in the willingness to remain awake inside the life you already built. I worked with a couple who came to me convinced they had fallen out of love. There was no dramatic conflict, but just distance. They described themselves as best friends and co-parents and partners in life, but not lovers. And during one session, I asked them, when was the last time you experienced each other outside your roles? And they both went quiet because everything in the relationship had become functional. They discussed logistics constantly and rarely discussed longing, rarely discussed desire, curiosity, fantasy, or emotional truth. They had stopped encountering each other as living human beings. They were relating to each other as responsibilities. So we started rebuilding presence, not forced passion, but presence, slowing down, eye contact, touch without agenda, honest conversations, space for individuality, space for desire to exist without immediately controlling it. And slowly something reopened, not because they found a new relationship, because they started becoming more alive inside the one they already had. Sometimes the spark doesn't disappear because love died. Sometimes it disappears because both people fell asleep inside the relationship. So what actually heals this? The answer is not automatically leaving, and it's not chasing the intensity of early romance or the memory of how things used to feel. It's building the capacity to experience aliveness inside safety, which is the deeper longing underneath all this, not novelty, aliveness. And this requires something most people were never taught: the ability to remain emotionally awake inside stability. Healthy love is not passive. It requires conscious participation, attention, curiosity, self-expression, sensual honesty, emotional openness, the willingness to keep bringing the living, feeling, wanting parts of yourself into the relationship instead of leaving them at the door. Because desire grows where attention lives. When people begin reconnecting to their body, their vitality, their sensuality, their emotional truth, their playfulness, their individuality, something reorganizes. They stop fantasizing about escape. They stop disappearing inside responsibility. They stop assuming the past felt better simply because it felt more intense. Love becomes something that can be felt again, not just maintained, not just managed, but lived. And sometimes when two people are willing to stay awake inside the relationship instead of merely preserving it, something surprising happens. The spark returns. Not as the chaotic intensity of early romance, but as something deeper. A living connection between two people who chose to stop disappearing. And sometimes becoming fully honest about aliveness reveals that the relationship cannot hold what you now know you need. Both outcomes require courage. Both are better than the slow grief of spending years abandoning the parts of yourself that once felt most alive. The real question is not, can the spark come back? The deeper question is, are we willing to become the kind of people who can experience aliveness again? Here's something to sit with today. Give it real space. Don't rush through it. Find 5 quiet minutes. Put the phone down and ask yourself 3 questions and let them land in your body, not just your mind. What parts of myself have I stopped expressing inside this relationship? Where did I begin choosing manageability over aliveness? What would it look like to bring one of those parts back? Not dramatically, but gently, starting today. In Tantra, we understand that Shakti, life force, doesn't need dramatic reinvention to begin flowing again. It needs permission, a small act of self-expression, one honest conversation, one moment of curiosity instead of routine. These are the openings through which aliveness returns. You don't have to blow up your life to feel alive inside it. You have to stop leaving yourself behind in order to maintain it. Sit with those 3 questions today. Write them down if that helps. Let the answers be honest, even if they're uncomfortable. That honesty is where it begins. The greatest tragedy in relationships is not always heartbreak. Sometimes it's spending years slowly abandoning the parts of yourself that once felt most alive and calling it maturity. I left Arizona at 18. I walked away from a life that was already built for me. The church, the plan, the good man, a certain future. And I want to be honest, it cost me something. The approval, the certainty, the belonging that came with stepping into the picture everyone had already framed. But I also knew, even then, without the language for it, that a life which looked right from the outside and felt dim on the inside was not a life I could call fully lived. Aliveness was not something I was willing to negotiate away, not then and not now. That's what the Tantric activation method is built on, not the pursuit of chaos or intensity, but the capacity to feel fully alive inside the life you are actually living. Tantra teaches that intimacy is not about escaping your life. It is about becoming more awake inside it. Relationships become transformative, not when they're perfect, but when they stop being places where people slowly disappear and start becoming spaces where both people come more fully alive. So I'll leave you with a question that started all of this for me, the one I had to answer honestly before anything else could change. Are you preserving your relationship, or are you still fully alive inside it? That question is worth sitting with. If this resonated, follow Love Activated so you don't miss the next episode. And if you want to go deeper into this work, the body, the aliveness, the capacity to feel fully present inside real love, you can find everything at sarrahrose.com. But before you move on, try the practice, 3 questions, honest answers, 5 minutes, because you were never meant to disappear inside the life you built, and you don't have to keep doing it.